Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the T.H.O. Movie Reviews podcast, the show where we bring you passionate, honest, and insightful film criticism. I'm your host, Bennett, Campbell, Ferguson, here today to review Avengers Endgame with Maxwell Meyers.
Ta-da!
Max, really serious question for you guys.
Yeah, us guy.
Yeah. It's a question about continuity.
Oh, God.
So, why the heck does Tony Stark look almost the same through this entire movie when everyone else gets like a dramatic, hair or beard or a uniform change?
I mean, because he's a classic and you can't change Tony.
We can't mess with the satanic goatees, what you're saying.
Yeah, it's the best goatee ever. Also, he kind of starts the movie emaciated.
He
so
does.
that's kind of like his first, like, I mean, he doesn't really need a new suit because he was almost like a skeleton, which props on the editing department in the trailer. I never caught that. I don't know if they filled him out in the trailer, but I remember watching the movie the first time I was watching it. It was like, oh God, he's like a skeleton. I was like, I don't remember that in the trailer. Was that in the trailer? Oh, those tricky bastards.
Hey, you try, floating out there in the void.
With Nebula.
With Blue Karen Gillan.
Oh my God. I love it.
As I said, we're going to review the movie.
We're also going to reveal the movie with spoilers.
Spoilers. Oh no!
Oh! It's okay.
Is this a good time to say that nobody who dies comes back and Thanos wins? Boom!
Oh no! Yeah, I was so surprised about the volcano. Also, that part where Tony Stark and Thanos is one connected because they have the same core.
I know,
right?
I know. I didn't see that coming. that was inventive. We didn't seen movies go in that kind of direction.
My friend said the part that she cried the hardest at when Batman died.
Oh, heartbreaking.
Yeah, simply tragic.
By the way, tangent.
Yes.
I think it's really funny that everybody expected, or a lot of people expected, Christopher Nolan to kill Batman. Because he's Christopher Nolan. Yeah. He's dark. He's gritty.
Yeah. Okay.
And then he lets Batman retire to Italy in peace.
Well, I like that he kind of does, but at the same time, I was like, or is it? And I was like, you know what? Can you just give me a straight answer here, okay?
I think he really did retire. And then Marvel, who is renowned for being kind of peppy and upbeat, it's like, no, we're killing Tony Stark. Boom! We're gonna have this funeral that's gonna break your heart. It's like the opposite of what you expect.
I don't know. I kind of was expecting somebody to die permanently a little bit sooner. I mean, Gamora, we got Gamora, but at the same time, it was also, I don't want to say, but it's Gamora. But I mean, yeah, Tony Stark has a big death.
Tony Stark, yeah.
What did I say?
Yeah.
Did I say Tony Stark?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Good. I was like, for a second, I thought I said the wrong name. But no, Gamora she's lovely, but it broke my heart, and I think, but I mean, as in the grand scheme of the universe, I mean, yeah, she's no Iron Man, she's no Captain America, and I was actually surprised even in Civil War we didn't lose anybody. That was actually one of my critiques about Civil War is, not that I don't love the team, but Rhodey almost dying, I feel like is like a cop-out, like, oh,
yeah,
is he dead?
Yeah.
Oh, don't worry, he's fine. Like, I was like, that feels like Marvel brand, so I guess getting anybody to die, is a little surprising, but I feel like this was like the one excuse they had to kill 7 people. Although before this podcast, I was saying I would have been surprised if we had up to 3 deaths.
I think that was reasonable. I mean, honestly, there were not that many deaths in the grand scheme of things. I was surprised there were actually as many as they were, to be honest.
And then, I knew we were going to get out of this without somebody. My money was not on Tony Stark, although all my money
I thought
on
he was going
Tony
to retire to his garage and Tinker be like an old man,
And funnily enough, that's what Captain America did, and
we'll get to that.
Oh,
because there's a lot to talk about there.
Oh yeah. Oh,
but I just want to hear from you. What did you think of the movie overall?
I really liked it a lot. What did I say? I loved it. I loved it for what it was. I think it's a great movie.
Why do you say what it was?
Well, because I think right now, the last I checked, it was sitting at like an 85% Rotten Tomatoes score. And
Wait, wasn't it in the 90s? Did it go down that much?
I think
I thought it was like 95.
Maybe I remember the last time I checked, which I think was right after they had like posted it, and it was at 85%. I think that was before audience tomato meter, which I'm sure may have sent it up higher. But when I think it was just critics, it was 85. I was like, I felt like that was really appropriate because I think the sign of any great movie is how well it can exist by itself. And I think that's why Iron Man, I would say, has like a higher rating because you could watch that and just like, oh, and we're done. Like, you wouldn't have to watch anything else after that. This one requires Infinity War, and a lot of it requires having been there. Like, you can't just be like, hey, I know you saw Iron Man and you watched Thor 1 and 2. Do you want to see Endgame? You can't do that. Like, that's...
No.
And
well, like, you know, like, I went with my mom and dad to see Iron Man at the Academy Theater.
Yeah.
And they loved it, you know, but, like, they haven't seen hardly any of the others because at this point it's, like...
Yeah.
It's harder to enter in, you know, an episode of 22.
Yeah. And on top of that, like, there are so many pieces. It's not like trying to catch up for Age of Ultron.
Sure. So, like, I mean, going back to what you were saying.
But so,
like,
but
you're saying it was like, you like it like. Are you talking about like you love it for what it was as kind of a piece of a larger puzzle?
Exactly. Okay. I think it's one of the best Marvel pieces we got. But I mean, so just like as a technical level, like it's not a movie that can just live by itself out in the world.
Sure.
But I think it is. It's nice. It's a great payoff. I think they could have taken the story in multiple directions, and I think where we do go, I like it, and I was really happy with it. And so I was like, you know, this is good. And I think there are some areas where it's lacking a little bit, but it's
and we
nice.
Can talk about those.
Yeah, but I think it has fan service without going overboard, and I think it gives us a lot, and I think there are some criticisms that are just now kind of like, you know, we can really live with it, you know, that we can find a little bit more so.
For sure. Well, there's a lot of minutes.
Exactly.
In that movie, so.
Exactly, and it's really hard, and that's why I saw it a second time before this, just because to catch other things. So the first one, you're just kind of experiencing it because it's all happening so fast.
Yes.
Like second time, you can kind of like look at things and still catch stuff. And, do a little more analyzing. What about you?
I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I mean, I certainly have my misgivings about, you know, the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole, mainly that I feel that, you know, and I think this movie reflects some of this, like, you know, having everything have to be connected. Mm-hmm. Like, I think it does close off, you know, a lot of narrative avenues, just as it opens a lot of narrative avenues. I do still think it's like hard for directors to like be creative in that environment, but just because I disagree with you know, the system they have in place to make movies doesn't mean I don't think that system is capable of producing good movies. And this I think is a really good movie, and I think, you know, the mark of that for me was that, you know, I mean, Ant-Man and the Wasp. You know, not a movie that, you know, even though I wrote a review of it after I saw it, I gave a lot of thought to.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, this, you know, it kind of chilled me to the core. Mm-hmm. I was thinking about it nonstop for days afterward. And what I really respect about it is that it isn't afraid to take you on a real emotional roller coaster ride. Yeah. And I mean, you know, we talked a lot last year when we were reviewing Infinity War about, you know, Thanos' snap.
Yeah.
And I always felt like the snap was kind of a little bit of a cheap bit of audience manipulation because, of course, these people are coming back. But it's one thing to have that as a cliffhanger. I actually found it to be pretty interesting exploring the idea of, you know, grief and PTSD and how does the world, you know, move on, you know, after something like that, and I still like feel like they could have come up with a cliffhanger where it wasn't as obvious that everything was going to be okay. But I still think the aftermath was a really interesting thing to explore, and I don't know. There's just a lot of really like for an enterprise this big, there's a lot of really good delicate filmmaking. Like just something as simple as starting it with Hawkeye and his daughter, and the first shot being the tip of the arrow.
Yeah.
And just little details like that, I think, kind of ground it in the human, which is really what all the great comic book movies do.
Whenever
even going back to
human.
like Christopher Reeve,
yeah,
as Superman, when we don't really think about the action, we think about him and Lois, flying, up in the sky.
Oh my gosh! Oh, that scene, that movie, that's good. Yet, like, I gotta roll my eyes a little too, but but I love it.
It's aged in interesting ways.
It's aged like a wine.
Yeah, like a. I don't want to say like a fine wine.
That's why I said a wine.
A wine.
It is aging like wine.
Yeah, like
it is changing. It is maturing. Getting a little fruity, maybe.
Oh man.
But I really liked Endgame, and I was like, this is definitely feels like if you've watched the movies, you're going to love this. It gives you, it feels like a great period. Just like, I think I said to Mo, who's not here with us today because he's sick, I said, I'm like, it really feels like it could have been just like, the end. And he goes, or, just the end of a sentence. So it's like, it's a new beginning. And
yeah.
And I think
it is that too.
It is.
I mean, it's to a certain degree, it's, setting the table for the next generation, which has obvious, benefits for Marvel because, I mean, like, who are we kidding? It's not true the end.
No, exactly.
It's the end of a cycle. It's not the end of a franchise.
I think Feige has said that he wants to scale it back after this, and I think knowing that
that's smart.
It is smart, and I think he's set himself up for that. I feel like they went big, but not too big. Like, I felt like it was unlike the Battle of Winterfell, which premiered the same weekend. I could actually see a lot of the action happening on screen, and
it's amazing that because of the Battle of Winterfell, that will now be a new bar for battle scenes.
Yeah.
Was it visible?
You would think that it was like with the requirements of.
We're not just talking about like good action choreography anymore or good special effects. It's like,
who just died?
What was going on?
Are they alive? Who's actually attacking them? Are they alive? Are they dead? Who knows?
I'm glad you brought up like the idea of like scaling things back. Because that kind of plays into something I wanted to ask you.
Oh man!
So I mean, this
I would say I was leading you into the next questions, but as we discussed beforehand, I did not read the questions. Maybe.
Oh, it's because we're late.
We got this.
You do this long enough, you get that.
Oh, you wouldn't go to the game this long, kid.
It's a hell of a thing.
Yeah.
But this movie was written by Christopher Marcus. Stephen McFeely. They've been writing Marvel movies since Captain America, the first Avenger. They wrote all 3 Captain America movies. They worked on Thor: The Dark World. They wrote Infinity War, and now Endgame. They have this long history in blockbuster movies because they worked on the scripts for all 3 Narnia films, which kind of
fizzled out.
Yeah, but we're in a way I think good training for these because you're having to balance character moments with kind of a big
battle
sweeping
sequences.
Yeah. So I mean, I think when we talk about these movies, I mean critics in general, understandably we talk about the actors, we talk about the Russos who have now done 4 Marvel films, we talk about Kevin Feige who I mean is really executive producer isn't even really the right word because he's more like a showrunner.
Yeah, he's like captain of the ship.
Yeah, but the script obviously plays a big role here and kind of taking all these disparate plot elements and streamlining it into one big 3-hour epic that has a specific emotional journey. I mean, what do you think the writers brought to it that made it work? Because I think they're a big part of the reason why it works as well as it does.
I think it's just the balancing act. I think that really is the key. I think when we watched the first Avengers, one of the things Joss Whedon was praised for was balancing screen time with the characters. But that also comes down to script too. I mean,
oh yeah.
I mean that was what 6 characters. You know,
yeah,
like one
which looks like nothing now.
Yeah, like one character had 2 movies. That was it. Like,
yeah,
and most of the people didn't even see Captain America before seeing the Avengers, or some which only saw Captain America out of the obligation before the Avengers. But
and a lot of people probably didn't see the Incredible Hulk.
Oh yeah, exactly. So
which is still, I think, the lowest grossing one.
I think so. But I just realized I forgot to put my phone on silent. We're good. But because of that, I think. I mean, that was then. This is now, and it was the choice. I think they had all this roster. I think Marvel was like, "All right, here you go. Here are all the toys," and they're like, and it was figuring out what to do with all these parts. And sure. I think it was. I think some people criticized Infinity War because it didn't do much. But, I mean, in the grand scheme of things...
You mean do much with, like certain characters?
Like, plot. Or... Like, I mean, the thing only spans over, like, a day or 2, I think. And it's really, you're just kind of following...
That's weird to think, but you're right.
Yeah, like, all you're really doing is kind of seeing Thanos succeed, which... we see happen through various ways. We have all these pieces, and then we take all those pieces, and then we cut them in half. And then from there, it allows us to go, okay, now we don't have, 30 characters, we just have 15 we have to deal with. And then also the choices to only bring in, all 50 characters, which is more than we thought we'd get, only for the final battle when all it has to be is, smash.
Right, sure.
And so I think that choice of how to, balance the characters and what to do with them, I think is really what has been their strong suit, which is, as you said, and bringing up the... Chronicles of Narnia, that one starts with 4 characters right off the bat.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
So, maybe in a way they've also been conditioning, and I really think they're the best. I think what made Civil War, or not Civil War, Winter Soldier work so well was that, it was, a pair of writers, a pair of directors, and the directors had come from Community, which was an ensemble show. I think it's really just... These two really great elements coming together and meshing so well, which is why we've just kept coming back to them and why we're like, wow, this is so good. What else can you do? And why it makes sense that when it came down to it, they were the most natural foursome to take on both Infinity War and Endgame.
Well, there was this attitude with the Winter Soldier, which was kind of like, let's sort of strip all the fat away.
Yeah.
Let's just make this about, like a man and his allies on the run. And oddly, I feel like Endgame kind of does that too. I mean, certainly it helps that half the universe has been wiped out.
Yeah.
It's funny, to talk about it in a clinical way, but I think, it's useful from a screenwriting perspective to simplify things.
Well, when you talk about how big the universe has gotten, I think knowing you can take half of the people out makes you go, okay, I feel better.
Yeah. But then also, I mean, I think one of the problems I had with Infinity War is it kind of felt like just this huge action special effects blowout.
Yeah, it just kind of feels like one long action, fight scene.
Exactly. And this, I think what was, in terms of the script, the most pleasant surprise for me was the time traveling midsection.
Yeah.
Because you have a whole section that's certainly it's exciting. There's suspense. But it's not just about people punching each other. It requires the characters to use their intelligence. It allows you to work in some comedy. It allows for the poignant moment between Tony and his dad, and it keeps the pulse racing. So
the time heist.
Yes, the time heist. Yes, but it's it allows you to tell this kind of. I mean, I think that whole thing was, more exciting than, the Battle of Wakanda in Infinity War. For instance, I think it's probably better than the battle at the end of Endgame, although I thought, we'll get to that later, but I thought that battle was pretty good.
Oh, it was most excellent. And I think you're right. I think McFeely and what's the other one? Marcus.
The M's.
Or the last names. That sounds like a first name. Marcus and McFeely I think you're right. They trimmed the fat really nicely, and even to an extent, you really kind of see it done here. Because I think a large complaint from a lot of people, and myself included, was when I saw Captain Marvel, I was really kind of excited to see how she plays the other Avengers,
right?
And the fact that she wasn't like in the mix for most of the movie, I was a little bummed out about. But at the same time, choices had to be made, and I really feel like. Choices had to be made. A certain, so many stories could have been told. This is the one we got, and I think kind of like the 14 million outcomes of Doctor Strange. I think they looked at all the different stories they could tell, and who could come, who could go, and what's the best option for telling the best story. And I think, at the very least, we'll never know what other options were explored, but to say if this was the best one, but this is a really good one, and I would at the very least say it was satisfying.
I really like, by the way, when Captain Marvel says, "Hey, Peter Parker."
I know, right?
I don't know. It's something of this kind of like that kind of like mischievous way.
Like
they kind of look at it.
like mischievous, like hey there, like also kind of nice, like a big sister. And I just love how terrified Peter is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a big sister, like a flirtatious babysitter.
Yeah, a flirtatious babysitter, knowing she can get her way with her feminine wiles. Right. Not that she's using them right now, but she knows she could. She's like Wendy from Gravity Falls.
I haven't seen that.
Oh my gosh, it's so good. It's so good.
Well, I promised we would talk about Old Man Captain America.
Old Cap.
Old Cap.
We got all Cap.
We got Old Man Logan. Now we're getting Old Man Steve.
Are you kidding, man? This show gave us... Somebody must have hit caps lock, because we got all caps. We got Old Cap. We got Hydra Cap.
Oh.
We got 1940s Cap. He gets to go back. We get dual caps. We get hammer wielding... Mjolnir wielding cap. So
I still don't understand that whole thing.
That's a whole plot point, and also it was explored in Age of Ultron.
But he couldn't lift the hammer in Ultron.
No, it moved slightly, and that you could see Thor's face go get really nervous. That's why he was like, I knew it because he saw it happen, and he goes,
okay,
yeah.
Point for Marvel, Joss Whedon.
Continuity, boom.
Continuity points. It's tangent.
Yes.
No prizes. Do you remember the whole thing about no prizes?
What?
Apparently they would give them at Marvel back in the day to I think it was readers who came up with explanations for things that didn't make sense, continuity wise.
Yeah.
I feel like there's some things here we could come up with no prizes. but I mean to me, the old man Captain America thing, the idea that he goes back in time to return the Infinity Stones, and then he stays there, has this life for decades. Not what I expected.
No.
At all. I got some issues with it that I'll get into, but tell me what was your reaction to that turn of events?
I was surprised that they did that because of, butterfly effects and whatnot. But also I like that, they explained at the beginning. This is the thing, is I was talking to my boyfriend, and he played a video for me from another YouTuber saying that this basically means that the multiverse theory is now in effect, and that, any reality can be a real reality, and all this and that. And
but if it's a multiverse, how is he able to be there as an old man at the end? Wouldn't he just go off and to another timeline?
And that's kind of what I was, saying. And he's like, well, what do you think? And I go, I think it's a possibility, but at the same time, I also feel like multiverse theory is something that can't be as easily explained in a single movie. I think or at the very idea, the implications of it can be explored in a single movie of it. And I think what Marvel has done is created the opportunity to do so, but also
potentially in Spider-Man Far From Home.
Potentially, but again, at the same time, I also that's also a whole other thing of can of worms to juggle. Because, I know that Feige said that the TV shows have been operating, independently. Yeah. And so, I don't know. I feel like it could be, but at the same time, it also might not be. Because you could also go with the explanation that maybe Cap comes back with the, you know, knowledge, knowing that, you know, he can never, you know, publicly come out, and, you know, there's just like rules in play.
Sure.
Like, and he can't alter the future because of that. Like, maybe he just happens to live out his life outside without anybody noticing. I don't know. Maybe he does. Maybe he doesn't. But I feel like Marvel kind of has ended Endgame with really the ability to go nope or sure to whatever you want. So
well, there's a lot of MacGuffins in play to
exactly.
justify these things.
I mean, also we saw the Infinity Gauntlet in Thor, and we're like, oh, that's where it's at. And then later we're like, how does he have the Infinity Gauntlet? And then we go to another Thor movie, and they're like, oh, it's fake. And you're just like, oh, I guess we're just gonna retcon later if we don't like it. So, I mean, they're masters of that, and it works because you can then go, no, it's okay, it's fine. They're gonna fix that later. Like,
so here's my take.
Yeah, what's your hot take
Cap.
on Old Man Cap?
So I mean, like, on the one hand, I appreciate the thought behind it, because with the one of the Russos. I always just say the Russo, but the Russo machine. I always just say the Russo brothers said, but it's like I keep thinking like, well, they don't talk in unison, so it must have just been one of them that said it, you know. But one of them said, you know, this movie's about Tony Stark moving toward selflessness, and Steve Rogers moving toward a kind of enlightened self-interest, and I think that's an interesting idea. The idea that, you know, he, as they said, or one of them said, that
someone said
he gets to the point where he feels like he's earned the right to put down his shield. Here's where I take issue with it.
Tell me your umbrage.
This guy, Steve Rogers, is such like a hardcore kind of altruistic patriot. I don't think that he would ever feel like he'd earned the right to put down the shield. And the other thing to me is, like, I feel like one of the things I like the most about superheroes in general is that all of them, like, are defined by some kind of loss that, you know, defines them. And I said define twice, but whatever. And the idea is that it can't be undone. Like, no matter how many times you save the world, Bruce Wayne's parents can't come back. Uncle Ben can't come back. Yeah, I mean, they're always, you know, Jonathan can't rise from the grave. Neither can Krypton itself. You know, like, all these characters, I think, you know, what makes them relatable and what, you know, keeps them from seeming like sort of aloof gods is that there's always going to be this hole in their heart, and their you know, their superheroics are in a way like kind of an effort to fill that. And I feel like it makes it too easy if Steve can just, you know, kind of blippity bloppity bloop, go back in time, and it's like, oh yeah, you know, the love of my life who I lost, you know, I can just, you know, like, do a little hocus pocus, little timey-wimey, and have this whole life with her. Like, it feels like, and this, it feels like it kind of like takes some of the stakes out of it.
See,
you know?
Well, and I think that's kind of what they were explaining in the movie. They kind of go over it really quickly because we do not have time to stop and really understand this.
But
that there is no such thing as a butterfly effect, which they actually explore a lot in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. There's a lot of time traveling elements in there, which you wouldn't expect. But the logic is that you can't have a butterfly effect because if you go back, that becomes part of the history. So, like, if you go back in time trying to change history, you're not going to, because whatever you did to go back in time to change history is why history is the way it is. So that just becomes part of the continuity. That's what it is. So by the fact that, you know, life wasn't immeasurably altered in that one moment, in that one space, is why I kind of argue that maybe it wasn't that what drove Cap. I mean, as you could say, what drove Cap to be as good as he was and not live the life was there's only one life he's ever wanted. I mean, he still holds the picture of Peggy Carter.
Yes,
even up until the 60s, as a picture of him on her desk, and that and even in as far back as Winter Soldier, Black Widow's like, let me set you up on a date. You should do this. You got to get out there. Everybody keeps telling him to get out there, and that's why
if you asked out Kristen from Statistics, she'd probably say yes.
Yeah, and that's why he's like, or like, you mean the girl with the lip ring? Yeah. I'm not ready for that. Like, it is just, and I think maybe it's just, and I think that might be why Cap has thrown himself into his work. Like, he sees, I came back. This is the only thing that still exists, or that's the only thing I ever know is this.
Sure.
That's the only life he's ever lived. So I think you're right. I don't think Cap would ever put down the shield.
Yes.
Unless given the opportunity to have the only life he's ever wanted, which was the love of his life. And I think it's more of a, I don't think Cap would put down the shield if there was any other way he could go back and redo that, and maybe knowing that it wasn't going to alter the future as long as he did this, this, and this, it'll be fine, which means he can come back and then also know that from this point on, there is no Captain America because of the choice he made, which is why he's like, hey, here's my shield. Here you go, Sam. And Falcon gets to be Cap, which I am so excited for.
That's great.
I am there for that.
Oh, yeah. I mean...
Oh, I think
Anthony Mackie is...
Anthony Mackie's
going to
do a great job. And also, just the idea of him having to step in... Anybody having to step into his shoes is going to be great. But he's also going to be sad because he lost his boyfriend. I mean, best friend.
Yes.
Best friend. Wishful thinking.
I guess though, I think you bring up a lot of interesting things, and I think what I keep coming back to is that the idea that he can go back and have that life makes it too easy somehow. Like I feel like the appeal like of Captain America, or a part of the appeal, at least the most interesting thing to me, is the man out of time thing. And I feel, and to some extent, I feel like that makes him relatable to all of us. Because I think we all have a sense of, I mean, look, every person's an individual. I think all of us look at the world and feel like, like almost like we're looking at a world we don't quite belong in. Mm-hmm. Because it's just, I mean, you can never know what anyone else is thinking for sure. So there's always a sense of isolation that comes with being human. Yeah, and to kind of like, and so I think that like the idea that he's this guy, is this World War II soldier, who's trapped, in our time, like oddly is what like makes him relatable, and then the idea that he can go back and he can turn back the clock, like kind of I feel like makes him less relatable. Like for me, the interesting thing would be if he found a way to like have a life now and adapted, as opposed to being able to kind of snap his fingers and reset things and have like the exact fantasy one. Because I feel like life isn't about getting your fantasy, it's about like kind of like building something new that you maybe didn't expect.
It's not getting the fantasy though. I think if given the option, I think we all have a price, and I'm not saying that as like a sell your soul to the devil kind of way, but I think Cap wanted to do what was right. I think, which was, help out in World War II. Like that's always been the thing, and I think he found a way out. And I think you're right. I think he would have been, and I think he knows he would have been Cap until the day he died. Which who knows how long that is, given his regeneration. Yes, and I think
been a long time.
Exactly, and I mean, who knows? But I really think. The idea they built on before that was that he loved Peggy Carter. Yeah. And it even reiterates it one more time, she was the love of my life. Yeah. And I think knowing he can go back I think it's giving him the happy ending he's always wanted. I think even in these 5 years, like half the world is gone. And he even holds a support group telling people that they have to move on. He proves he can't. There's no way he can. I think he just saw this opportunity, this one chance, and I think he knew that the world needs Captain America, and I think you're right. I think that is what makes Cap interesting. But you know what? I don't think what makes Cap interesting is the soldier out of time. That's what makes Steve Rogers interesting. I think what's going to make Cap interesting now isn't going to necessarily be that one thing. If anything, it's going to be a man trying to live up to this great man that was Steve Rogers, or maybe dealing with the choices.
Sam Wilson.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. He now, I think Captain America, the character, will be interesting in a new way. Yeah. But I think you're right. But again, this also comes back down to the writers. They were given Chris Evans is at the end of his contractual obligations.
Yes.
He has stated years before that he really wanted out. He said that this was going to be his last outing, and then he kind of teased that maybe it wasn't. Because I think maybe there's the chance that he could come back, but there's a chance that a lot of us could come back. Even Black Widow's death, which also happened in this movie, someone said that can't be undone. Someone's like, that's the death, it can't be undone. Even the Hulk is like, I tried snapping my fingers to make it undone, and I couldn't have it done. And I just heard somebody go, well, unless you go to the underworld and bargain with Mistress Death. And I was like, see, even there's a way to bring her back. So, but I think the option was we need to end his storyline, and it's do we kill him or can we give him the happiest ending? And I don't think Steve could actually exist today happily, knowing I don't think he could find that life. Oh, and I don't think he could ever. But I feel like he would feel the responsibility too much, and knowing if he did the thing right, he could go back. Cap would still do everything he needs to do, and he could have the life he's always wanted, which would be the only thing he would ever turn in the shield for.
But not necessarily talking about the character, but talking about just looking at this as a piece of storytelling. I mean, should he be happy? I feel that when you look at really any kind of big sci-fi fantasy epic, all the great stories deal with the fact that all these characters are gonna sort of be unsatisfied to a certain degree. Superman can't get Krypton back, but he can build a life on his adopted world. Batman loses the woman who he loved, but is able to kind of forge a new future with someone he didn't plan on forging with, but just might work. And it just I feel like we're getting into kind of some of these we're getting to some kind of I feel like this sort of
I think you just asked the question, should Captain America be happy? Hurts my feelings. And also goes against the whole peppy attitude of Marvel. I think when you have to say goodbye and you get to choose how, I think it shows you're like, well, let's just give him a happy ending. I feel like Stan Lee would have wanted him to be happy.
Here's the thing. That's I totally get where you're coming from. We were talking about Game of Thrones earlier. As a fan of Game of Thrones, do I want Jon Snow to get a happy ending? Of course I do, because I've been watching him for years, and I don't think of him as
he always seems so moody.
Well, I don't think of him as a character. I think of him as as pathetic as this sounds, almost like a friend.
Yeah.
And of course I want my friends to be happy, but then as a critic. As as a fan of storytelling as an art form, I don't think he should get a happy ending if artistically it's not the right choice. I think that's what it comes down to here. It kind of cheapens it with Captain America to have him be to kind of get this happy ending.
I have a feeling you and I are never going to see eye to eye on this one, only for a few reasons. Cap is my favorite, so of course I'm going to want Steve to be happy above all else. But wait, let me finish. Let me finish.
I have to ask you something after that.
Okay, I was I wanted to be happy. I was also, Peggy and Steve, I've always loved them. And you know me, I've always said it's weird that he dates her niece.
No, you'll get no argument from me on that.
So there's that.
Yeah.
Also, I think I want him to be happy. That's what makes Marvel Marvel. I think if I wanted a world where it's sorry, your parents are dead, and they're dead forever, and you will always be sad about it, I'd go to see a Batman movie.
But to be honest, let's be honest, that's more interesting, isn't it?
No. And it depends on the person. You know who I would love? I think this is what makes... And also, I just lost Tony. We've taken away Tony.
Yeah.
I'm already sad about that. No, I personally would not choose to be more sad about knowing that Captain America will just never be happy, because that's kind of the point.
Okay, let me put it to you in a different way. How would you feel though if he had some other fate that wasn't horribly dismal, but he's like, hey, I'm here. I didn't get everything I want, but I'm going to make the most of the life I have, and continue helping people as long as I can. It wouldn't have been like the ideal ending, but wouldn't it have been an ending that would make more sense and be more interesting?
But I think I do argue that it makes more sense that he kind of goes back, because it's proof. He says I love Peggy. Peggy's the love of my life.
Yeah.
I tell people that they need to move on, and I can't. He's for 5 years he can't move on. Like, he's literally been given 1, 2 like quote unquote fresh starts, and here he is again. I think it's proof that he finds himself to only be the job. I think he realized that there's no real social life. His friends are just work friends. He lived at Avengers Towers between 2 and Civil War. I just think, as far as what makes sense, I think that choice does make the most sense. That if there's no way Cap would ever not be Cap, I think he doesn't know anything else and fears doing anything else, which is why
I agree with that.
Which is why, even tearing down Hydra, he finds out Hydra's infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D. and he's like, I guess I'm still Cap, and he's like, well, I'm gonna fight all my friends, and they're like, and even then he's like, I guess I'm not Cap anymore. Here, Tony, if you need me to come back and be Cap, here's my cell phone number. I'll come back and be Cap. He makes it sound like he'll never, I think, and then 5 years goes by, and he's still I guess I just gotta keep being Captain America. He literally, in all that chaos, he could have gone full Ronin. Just like Hawkeye. Hawkeye, went off the boat, and he's just like, I guess I'm just gonna go murder bad people. Because, he's upset.
That was like Batman. But Zack Snyder's Batman.
Exactly. So I think, I do believe that Marvel is a brand, and for better or worse, that is what makes him better. Because guess what? I do love watching some form of suffering in the name of art. Hence why I'm still watching Game of Thrones, and why I even subjected myself to watching The Long Night on an edible. Was it a smart choice? No. But I liked a little bit of suffering. But you know what? And I went into Endgame knowing I'm probably going to lose at least one person, minimum. And I was even prepared for it to be Cap. I was just like, that's who it's going to be. I love him, but that's how it's going to go. So, and I think it's just more of a, this is our choice. We've already killed off Tony. We've already killed off Black Widow. We now have Cap. We have Chris Evans, who doesn't want to be here anymore. What do we do with this character? And I think, and again, if you think that this is, just like, oh, here we go, bye, we're never going to hear any kind of repercussion from this at all, you're wrong. You've never seen a Marvel movie. Yeah. I think it's more of, we've proven that there's only one life. One happy life Steve can actually see. He even got his best friend back from the dead. And that didn't even make him happy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think even with the choice of coming back and having, at least he's got his best friend with one arm. I think he's just like, this is how it is. This is my one chance here.
Sure.
And I think he took it. And I think that's the most thing that give me pause. I was like, I would never expect Cap to make that choice. So I think that's what makes him interesting, is the fact that he knows what he was doing. And I want to know why he made that choice. Or even the fact that he was like, you could tell he'd aged, because he's like, want to tell me about that ring? And he's just like, nope. He doesn't even, I was kind of fully expecting him to, have lived a whole life, but not with Peggy for some reason. That's why they're not going to tell me. But how do I even know? And that's, so I think artistically, could it have been, no, I would never have chosen to not give Cap a good life. I just lost Tony, I think, and I don't think I could have killed off Tony, killed off Black Widow, and then also been like, also let's just make it really hurt. I think artistically it could have been a good choice, but I like the choice made, and I would have picked it. I would have picked it myself.
But it wasn't necessarily a choice between killing him off and that ending. I mean, that's
true. But I think we have established that there's no real, he clearly can't live. That man cannot stop working for nothing.
No, for sure.
So that's why I think I think that's how I think that is the setup, is the recognition that the only way he can give up this is to have this, and he sees the only opportunity to get this.
I get a lot of what you're saying, and I do want to move on to the final question. But
final question.
I will say this. I feel that like it pushes things a little bit in like to the realm of wish fulfillment.
Okay.
You know, and there's like I feel that there were like better storytelling options, and that you could still give him like a really fitting end without like kind of literally bending time in half to give him like the most perfect ending. I want to ask you.
Yes.
This is, as we said before, not the end of a franchise, not by a long shot.
Just a beat.
But the end of a narrative cycle.
Exactly.
Is what we're looking at here. So, I mean, it's an opportunity to look back on what's come before. Mm-hmm. I mean, take this movie with the other 400 Marvel Studios movies that came before it.
And I watched all
starting
of them.
with Iron Man.
I watched them all.
You
and
did?
the shows.
Nice.
Did I not tell you that? Or have you not kept up with my Instagram, Ben? I watched all of the Marvel Universe.
Fail. I'm sorry.
I
should have guessed. I should have been like, keeping tabs.
So before Endgame, right around the end of January, beginning of February, me and my boyfriend, who he had seen all the movies, he hadn't seen all the TV shows, and I had seen most of the TV shows. Fell off a little bit. Didn't
you make him watch Inhumans too?
No.
Or did you skip Inhumans?
We ended up skipping Inhumans, but we did watch. We started with Captain America, the first Avenger, and we watched our way through the history of Marvel up until this point. I don't know if this is going to change after this. I don't know. But chronologically, so we keep moving forward. So it was Cap, and then Agent Carter, then Iron Man, because Captain Marvel wasn't out yet. And then you just, we worked our way through it. We did Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. We did all the Netflix series. Those series are so dark. And, we watched them all.
We'll take all of that.
Yeah, take it all.
As one big long-running narrative, are there particular themes that across these movies that you think stand out? Because I think there are a lot of common things. I mean certainly like a major idea that comes up and again is the kind of sort of amoral hero who ultimately redeems themselves, which is Iron Man or Thor, or the hero who switches sides in the case of Iron Man and Captain Marvel. I mean that's just one theme.
Captain Marvel.
Yeah, kind of switching from
like a double blind.
A double. Yes, exactly. But that's just one thing. Are there kind of narrative themes, ideas that you feel like that kind of persist across the vast ocean that is this universe?
I can tell you this. I noticed a theme with the Netflix shows, season 1 always really seemed to just have a great villain, just a great here's the story. And season 2 always seemed to bring back in their parents, and I was parents always seems to be a common theme, or just.
Well, who would have guessed that John Slattery would come back this many times as Howard Stark?
So many times. I love it. I love John Slattery as Howard Stark, and also seeing it the second time, one of my favorite parts of the entire movie that I just kind of missed in the first viewing, and I recommend I got to live in the dialogue a little bit more with John Slattery because I wasn't also thinking, God, I have to pee so bad. The line where
I thought that when I saw the timer too.
When he was when he said, "I really wish I was having a girl," and he goes, "Why?" He goes, "Oh, I'd hate to have a son. I'd be afraid he'd turn out like me." And Tony, this is I think why I was really just. I feel Captain America, I feel like we have to close the stories. Tony, it has to be death. It either has to be death or living out, your days of old. And I think you got one with one and death with the other. Not the way I thought it would go. But that part, he goes, well, what's so bad about that? And he goes, I'm afraid he'd be like me. And he goes, get some bad qualities. I know he would never fully ever sacrifice himself or something along those lines. He basically says, he would never not be selfish, and in that in this weird moment, Tony gets closure with his dad, but also in that one moment he also kind of highlights the one thing that has been Tony's thing, which is that he says he'll lay his life on the line. He's willing to sacrifice the suits, but like even he's like, I will do this time heist, but only if everyone that's here stays the same. Like that, it's all about like ultimately protecting this, even like as long as he doesn't have to die.
Sure.
Like big talk coming from a man in a suit. There's always this thin layer between him, and it isn't until he realizes there's only one way, and it's sacrificing himself, and he finally gets over that last hurdle and in a weird way gets like the ultimate closure. Like there's no way he was like his father, and that his father was misunderstood, and that maybe he was like his father but in a good way, and he finally learns all of that just in time for him to die. But it's good, and that's
sure.
what makes him I think is what allows him to know that he's a good father, and at the very least he did good. He did right by his daughter.
Sure. Well, and it brings up a thing, and this is going to sound weird at first, and then hopefully it will make sense.
Yes.
I get into it, but I feel like in a strange way, like a lot of these movies use Schindler's List as a template.
Oh boy.
Like the idea of kind of this heroic figure who doesn't start out as heroic at all goes on this journey towards selflessness and ultimately becomes an altruistic person. I mean, certainly it's Thor's journey, it's Tony Stark's journey, even in an odd way it's sort of Loki's journey, but I think
it's also kind of Scott Lang's story too, a little bit.
I think you're right, yeah, and I think it's interesting because like first what we had is like like the Wonder Woman, Batman, Spider-Man, Superman, like certainly those characters evolve and maybe become more selfless, but they start out pretty pure. Mm-hmm. It's kind of interesting. Like I don't think Wonder Woman was ever not a good person. Yeah, I think Peter Parker obviously makes serious mistakes. One of those mistakes gets his uncle killed. But I think he's always a good person at heart. Tony Stark and Thor do not really like start out as good people. Yeah. They become good people over the course of these movies, and it's such an interesting thing because these movies, with a couple exceptions, they're often not like about the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. They're often not about the underdog. They're about the overdog who kind of sees the value of helping the underdog, and even the very idea of S.H.I.E.L.D. is like that. It's not the X-Men, it's not the scrappy team out in Westchester. It's basically although not at a certain point, a government agency. Yeah, and it's kind of interesting, where the power comes into play, who it comes from.
Well, and I think that just comes from the idea of growth. I think that's the one thing we recognize the most is learning to not be selfish, learning to put someone else first. Sure. I think otherwise it just becomes I'm a bad guy when I do bad things, and people are like, I'm a good guy and I'm going to stop you from doing bad things. Everyone cheers for the good guy, and everyone's like, yeah, I'm a good guy.
That sounds like a pitch for Superman. The movie.
It's really easy, but I think we've as moviegoers have learned we want more complex stories, and what makes a cool hero is one you can relate to on a human level, and I think in a weird way, you kind of want to dislike a person so you can appreciate, that they've grown to make the self-sacrificing choice. Yeah. But also, in a weird way, Scott Lang's... But you're right, I think some of them, they do have that model, and it's more of how they deal with that. Scott Lang's not a bad guy. He just made a choice that was illegal.
He's not a bad guy, he's just kind of a dope.
He is and then on top of that, he's a dope, and on top of that, he's not really a superhero. He's just kind of clever. No. And really, he just wants, to be around his daughter more and be a better person for her. And that's ultimately his thing. He's like, oh crap, I have to be a better person. And since I can't cut it at Baskin Robbins, I guess I'll destroy a man in a suit. He goes on the adventure, but that is what, makes these journeys interesting is you're watching a person who isn't necessarily all good. As you say, sure, like you said, that's why everybody likes a villain. Villains are interesting because they're not just good. There's usually why are you a jerk? They're because you murdered my father. Like, oh, I understand why you'd be mad at that. And then now you've sympathized with the bad guys. So in a weird way, I think somebody was like, well, we kind of have to make the hero a little unlikable because then you can relate to him in that way as well. Like,
sure.
Like, there has to be a relation. So I think that is kind of the formula. It's more of what they do with it. And I think they vary it up enough. And I also feel like they've actually been pointed out enough times to them. You can actually see it shifting. It gets a little better. Like, they're like, oh, it doesn't have to be an origin story. And I think they're learning how to tell movies that aren't specifically that.
I feel like origin story fatigue is a little bit overrated. Because I feel like you kind like...
I think there's a time and a place.
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, like, there's a lot to be said. I mean, I think origin stories like allow you to, you know, really focus on character and motivation, and cut out a lot of the noise. I mean, this whole thing started with an origin story.
Yeah,
it started with, you know, Iron Man, which really carefully lays out his point of view, how his point of view evolves. His history, his relationships with other people. I mean, you know, I think the only time like it doesn't make sense is like a case like the Incredible Hulk, where that was, I think, just like 5 years after Ang Lee's Hulk, and it's at the point where it's like, you know, well, I don't need to, like, you know, see him get, you know, gamma irradiated, you know, when we just, you know, saw that, albeit just saw that in some weirdo art film. It cost over $100 million.
Well, and I think there is a balance. I think they do realize that. I think they realized that really once they got their hands on Spider-Man. I think there is a time and a place. You know, I think you need to set up at the very least. I think it started with Iron Man. It's like, oh, we need to explain who Iron Man is because not a lot of people know who Iron Man is. Yeah. And then you do all this and you're like, okay, well, now we've done this. Then you get something like Guardians where you're like, well, we got to kind of set up who they are. And I think James Gunn kind of really helped show you, like, you know, we don't need to do, like, too much backstory to have, like, a group of people get together.
Although, in a way, it's the origin story of not the characters, but the team.
Exactly. But that's the thing is I think seeing that and going, oh, okay, we know how to, like, set up who someone is without having to be like, their dark, tragic history of when they were a child. And so when you get something, and I think their first...
Although it did start out with Peter Quill.
It does.
And his mother dying of cancer.
I know, but thankfully we didn't have to, like, watch him, like, learn to be a thief. You're just like, oh, wow, his mom died, he got kidnapped, and then he made a lot of terrible choices. Classic space ghetto story, am I right?
Watching him learn to be a thief, that sounds like a Guardians of the Galaxy meets Solo. Where we have to, like, spill everything out ad nauseum.
Exactly.
I think I'll call you Peter Quill because you're carrying a quill.
Exactly.
You know? And no one wants that.
Exactly. So, and then I think you get Spider-Man where you're the first one. You're just like, we know how he becomes Spider-Man to an extent. Like, even although I do like that this is kind of like a little bit. Like, they weren't like, here it all is. Also, I have an Uncle Ben. They just mentioned, you know, that Aunt May's single and Uncle Ben's not there.
I still think that was a huge mistake not to, like really, like, hardly acknowledge him at all.
I feel like
I still can't get over it.
We'll see what I actually, not to derail too much, but the Civil War, that part where he's like, you know, people get hurt. I feel like there's that. I think it's nice to know that the character lives with it, that I feel it's somewhere within him that I don't have to explore it because, you know, this will be my third time losing Ben. It might be his first time, but it'll be my third time. And you know what?
You're traumatized.
Well, it's like a Russian Doll, my favorite TV show of this year so far. It's like eventually you just get desensitized to seeing Ben die. You're just like, okay, I get it. He died, and now we feel bad.
I mean, which is, kind of, I think, an argument against this whole, like, reboot culture.
A little bit.
Like, I mean, there's something to be said for, like, you know, leaving things well enough alone, because I mean there are a lot of these characters, even famous characters, like, I mean, look how many years it took to get, you know, Carol Danvers.
I feel but then again, look where they wanted to put her. Like, oh man. So I feel like I think there's a precedent, there's a time and place. Like, I don't need to be dropped into Spider-Man. And then depending on the story, like, hell, we kind of get dropped halfway through Ant-Man. Like, we get dropped in, we meet Scott Lang, and it turns out there's an Ant-Man. Oh, he's been around forever. But we're not here to talk about that Ant-Man or his, you know, 40, 50 plus year history. We want to talk about a brand new Ant-Man. So in a weird way, it's kind of halfway through or partway into a story that already had begun. And that's
kind of the whole Mask of Zorro thing where you have, like, Antonio Banderas, you know, and Anthony Hopkins. And,
but
not that invented that trope.
But I do like that. But y'all, so yeah, I don't want to be dropped into what is like, partway through Doctor Strange's story. That's a lot of stuff for, like, I don't know any of it. Like, that sequence alone, when his astral projection gets pushed out of his, like, body, up until he begs Tilda Swinton to teach him.
Yeah.
Like that whole sequence, like, I wouldn't want to have to, like, fall into after that. Like,
yeah.
it needs the setup, but also they're learning how to, like, not linger. And I think they're finding that balance, and I think they're gonna apply a lot of that now that we have all these past characters into a lot of some of the new stuff that we might be getting. So
sure, yeah.
I feel like the benefit of being around for a 20+ movie franchise is I think they're really starting to fine tune a lot of things and figure out how to tell, stories that make you feel, but just maybe a little bit more efficiently that we could still relate to. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Who did you, when you left the theater? Who did you end up loving more than you expected? Like, I feel like going into it, I was like, oh, I can't wait to see Cap. Oh, I can't wait to see what happens with, like, Captain Marvel. But when I left, I was really impressed with Nebula. I loved Nebula and her journey and where we follow her and, like, learning more about her. It actually felt really nice. Like, every time I see her, I learn a little bit more about her, and I learn to like her a little bit more. Like, even, just being, like, the first shot when, they're playing, like, paper football, and she's, like, she's, like, flicking it, and she, like, goes wildly off course. She's like, ah! Like, she's, like attacking this paper football like it's an actual enemy, and she's, like, so into it, and then, like, Tony, like, reached out, like, all right, you won, good job. Like, clearly the first time she may have ever beaten anybody at anything in her life, and she's just, like, you just kind of see all that unfold and, like, catching it back again. I was like, you know what? I really love Nebula. And I'm also excited, like, when she comes out and she's like, you guys should fight to be captain. Like she kind of folded right into the Guardians really nicely. I was just like, you know what? You aren't just the blue meanie. You are a person with a history and now friends and a family. And,
yeah.
And I really love that we get to see her kind of, like, interact with Gamora after she's, settled all of her... Oh, well, not all of... But a lot of her issues. Yes. And then on top of that, convince Gamora that she's like, we were sisters. Like the fact that you get these payoffs, it makes Guardians 2 really worth your time. Not that it wasn't before, but it did feel a little fluffy at the time, but... Going back and watching,
it still feels a little fluffy to me.
You'd be surprised, like, after the shit I went through, like, leading up to Guardians. That was actually the one thing when you watch it in chronological order. You go Guardians Volume 1 and then Volume 2, and then they're just gone. You don't see or hear from them until Infinity War. And I was like, it actually felt really nice. The feeling of them, like, rolling up on the ship felt exactly like how I feel like the exact feeling they were going for. I was like, oh, my friends, oh my god, I haven't seen you in so long, and it actually makes sense that you guys are so familiar, because it's actually been years since we've seen you, not just like a single year, which is when Guardians 2 premiered.
Right.
And it, like, when put into the continuity, it actually feels a lot more, and also, like, getting to see Gamora alive and make up with her sister again, like, it all like revisiting it and then coming back and then seeing just how she unfolded. I'm really excited for Guardians Volume 3.
Although I'll answer your question in just a sec. Although I have to say, they gave James Gunn such a raw deal by having him. It's like you get Gamora back, but she's a Gamora from the past. So yeah, all that character development you did. Like, that's undone. Like, I feel like that's, like, I don't know, that's getting into the problems of, like, when you have to have synergy between so many different properties. It's like...
But I'm so excited, though, because that, like... Because the Guardian script was... And the whole thing with... Like, the Guardian script was written before the whole fiasco with, them firing him. So... And the script for Endgame was written, like... Infinity War as well, because, like, they rolled right from one to the other, so that James Gunn is, like, aware of it. So, and the fact that he's back, I was like, okay, well, if the script is in play, he's aware of that. I was like, it is a little sad that we kind of have to, like, deal with the whole, like basically Bucky and Captain America in space, but with love, like actual love.
Because you gotta admit, like even if he was involved, it's such a raw deal. from a screenwriting perspective, like, you have to, like, deal with, like, this story you told, like, kind of being undone, and you got this weird thing there.
Maybe I sympathize only because I'm like, well, but he was aware of it, so maybe he was like, but he's like, I'm going to tell a much better story. So I feel like I was a little like, great, now I have to deal with forgetful, I don't know anything Gamora, but at the same time, I'm like, I put my trust in James Gunn that he's aware of the choice and that he made something really good out of it, so... I
want to answer your question.
Oh, yes, please.
This is going to sound weird about who I liked more than I expected to. Actually, Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark.
Whoa.
Because, like, I've gotten progressively less excited about the character and his performance as time went on, because, like, I feel like at a certain point the same thing happened with him that happened with Johnny Depp on Pirates of the Caribbean. Like, what initially seemed kind of edgy and revelatory,
and fun.
Yeah, like started to kind of have this, this sort of prepackaged vibe, and it kind of felt like, oh yeah, Tony Stark says another quip, like it started to feel like a little phoned in, and this time it felt like he had upped his game. He seemed more like fully present when he's like going ballistic at the beginning, when he realizes they failed. Like, I thought you could really feel his grief, and then, of course at the end, and I am Iron Man.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
I love how it
pulls
ended.
it off with flair. But I do want to like talk about like what I've noticed, like looking at the big picture of all these movies. I mean, I just because it's been so long and so much has changed in the time since this whole thing started, I can't help but like see it through the lens of like how much America has changed. Mm-hmm. I mean, you look back at the first Iron Man when that came out. George W. Bush was still president, and that movie, is the war on terror is the biggest part of the plot, and then,
the fact you say the war on terror, and you're just like, I feel like things have become so much more serious than that.
Well, and then wind the clock 4 years later to the first Avengers film. It's the end of Obama's first term. The country is kind of dealing with the having gone through this extremely bitter partisan debate over healthcare, and you have a team of heroes who are concerned with certain external threats, but more with internal threats. I mean,
that's
the whole set
plot.
of best. We're not a team. We're a time bomb. I mean, that was America at that moment. In a lot of ways, that's what America is now. And then now we get to Endgame, and things are we're at a more like divided, painful moment than ever. And now it feels like less the movie's reflecting what's going on, and more that we have like all these characters who are all very different, uniting together to combat a single existential threat. I mean, now that almost seems like less that we're kind of we have a purposeful or perhaps just coincidental metaphor for what's happening, but we have like a dream of how things could be if people get their shit together, And I think it's kind of interesting. I think it's I'm thinking back to in the Adam West Batman movie where he says, "What is a dream but a blueprint for courageous action?" And it's like it's a joke, but I feel like you actually look at what he's saying. What's a dream but a blueprint for action?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel that plays a role here. Like, I feel like that the movie is trying to give us something to aspire to.
That weekend we saw how things could be. Either we all band together and survive, or we all band together and still get eaten alive by the dead. Yeah, I mean, I think it is interesting. You're right that it does kind of mirror how things feel, and I think that actually just gives more argument to the genre as a whole. I feel when you have something that exists in a single universe, it allows you to maybe reflect more so on what's going on at the time. I think a lot of people look back at the 70s and you can watch a film and you're like, they're talking about this. And you're like, this actually just really speaks to more so. This is a director or a writer talking more so about the plight of this person, about dealing with this thing that was going on, which was brought upon by these things, which ultimately is how good cinema is made, is, it's a reflection of the times, and that, like, what they say about theater is supposed to hold a mirror up to society.
Exactly.
So maybe these superhero movies don't hold a mirror up to society per se, but maybe sketches out like the ideas and the feelings of the time, and maybe when we look back on it 20 years from now, we will start making that connection, like the farther you get away from it. Because you're right, I hadn't actually thought about that kind of connection, about maybe how today's socio and political climate is maybe affecting how we write it. I mean, Infinity War, even for Marvel's peppy, happy-go-lucky, quippy Iron Man, feels, a little, like, compared to where we're at Endgame. I mean, but at the time, that seems right. Like, Iron Man, like, how you're feeling at that time, that seems right. Like, you think of the feeling you had compared to, like, now, and I don't know about you, I feel a little unsure about a lot of things, and even just looking at, like...
100%, yeah.
Exactly, and I think... But I also, in a weird way, kind of like the end of Endgame, I'm kind of looking to it more of, I don't know what's coming, but I have to have faith that it's going to be okay. And it's going to be fine. And I think, but that will therefore argue, that's what proves this is actually like an cinema. This is not just a popcorn blockbuster film, or that maybe a popcorn blockbuster film can do both things. Kind of like how all the movies are a superhero movie and something else.
Sure.
Maybe maybe with at the very least it will give us a thermometer or a barometer of the times. So
I think you're right, and I think it does. I mean, and superhero movies are always talked about kind of in conjunction with the Western, because that was sort of the go-to genre, of its day, and the Western was, really dealing with things that are kind of baked into what America is, and is dealing with the idea of manifest destiny, of like kind of trying to subdue nature. I mean, and we keep coming back to the Winter Soldier, and I mean, I think there are a lot of reasons for that, but I mean, isn't one reason that the Winter Soldier, like more than a lot of these movies, plugged into something vital? I mean, the movies about the Patriot Act.
Yeah,
the movies about the ascension of
how much autonomy
of a Nazi death cult within this what looks
government
to be,
agency.
I mean, it's
that seems like a real stretch, Ben.
I mean, but that
Nazis coming back again.
But that doesn't that just like appeal to the paranoia of anyone, like no matter where they are in the spectrum politically? Because don't we all feel that, like, wake up in the middle of the night feeling that there's a conspiracy
that the government
somewhere? You know what I mean?
I would also argue that, I mean, looking back, even watching Captain Marvel, which came out this year, focuses on the 90s.
Yeah.
But even that kind of taps into the feeling of the 90s, even though it wasn't made then. Like, this idea that, like, I feel like, but more so it taps into how we're viewing the 90s now, which is more of, I don't know, my boyfriend, he's 42, so he was around through the 90s, but like this, like things seem fun, things seem great, but actually there's kind of something sinister lurking underneath, like things weren't as good as you quite remember, or like it seemed great like on the surface, but when you dig a little deeper you realize there's actually a lot of other stuff going on, and that's kind of the journey that Carol goes through. Like, first it's just, I'm just investigating this thing, and things seem fine, things are okay, wait, no, wait, no, the deeper it goes, the worse it gets. And so I think this is great. I think it's wonderful. I think that argues that these series need merit, and maybe it will go the way of the Western, but I think right now we're doing pretty good at 10 years. That's I don't see them going away.
I mean, maybe more than 10 years if we think of Christopher Reeve's Superman is kind of the moment when this whole thing like got kicked up a notch, and then grew from there.
I think it argues actually also for the shared universe. Like you said, Feige doesn't really feel like a producer. He kind of feels like a showrunner.
Yeah.
And in a weird way, it is nice. It's like seeing a serial. It's now one piece of a larger puzzle. You get to like sit down and watch it. But also, I think at the same time, they are talking about things that are going on.
Sure. I mean, I still feel like the shared universe idea like works better in comics than in movies. But I think you bring up a lot of really important stuff. And first of all, the 90s looked great if you think that everyone was just hanging out in Central Perk.
Yeah.
I mean? But like
riding motorcycles.
Yeah.
And talking to Stanley.
But I mean, Captain Marvel. What's it about? It's about the Skrulls are refugees. And the Kree are kind of this, imperialistic force, and she has to decide, whose side is she on? Is she on the side of the exploiters or the exploited? And she makes a choice, and that's playing out a drama that's
or
one that persists throughout history.
Oh well, yeah, or just like the there's these bad people. Oh, why are they bad? Because they're bad, and they did all these things, and it turns out.
Well, one of them's played by Ben Mendelsohn.
Oh yeah, you're just like, oh, they're bad people, and it's just like, oh, I guess they're bad people. They did all these things, and it's like actually, and like until you sit down and talk to this, like actually no, it's the other way around.
Yes,
in a weird way, I think the Skrulls are a great metaphor for the minorities that literally live among us and look just like you and me, but they're being exploited by this powerful group. And what makes Captain Marvel so great, or Marvel, is standing up with the knowledge of what is happening, going, oh crap, that's not okay, and I should stop it, even though just because these people raised her, gave her everything, doesn't mean what they're doing is right, and therefore she needs to be on, what side of history do you want to be on is the question. And I think that is kind of explaining that a little bit, and also a conversation we're having now. So
yeah, absolutely.
I think it's great.
I think that's a great note to end on. But do you have any final thoughts? Do you want to name the obscure Marvel character who you think should lead the next lineup of Avengers?
I think I read too much, but I think it if we're gonna pick a leader, I would love to see it be Sam. I think we kind of get to see Cap struggle a little bit. Like he's like, I don't know, I'm a soldier and I know how to lead soldiers, but I don't know how to lead superheroes. I think we'll kind of get to see. I'm excited to see Sam wrestle with the idea of leading. Maybe he's like, I have to be in charge. I need to lead, and like, how do you fill Cap's shoes, but also have I think all the things that give Sam an advantage. He has some opposite thing. Like, I feel like Cap knows how to wrangle some soldiers. Did not know how to wrangle superheroes. I feel like Sam's been around long enough. He could probably wrangle some superheroes. How do you be Captain America? How do you like you said, man, that guy can give a speech. How do you give a Cap speech? I think I would like it to see him I think for plot wise. I want to see that struggle. See, I like the struggle too, Ben.
You do. I can tell. Struggle points.
Thank you.
Accordingly.
Pain points all around.
I mean, okay, I know he's DC, but just for yucks, I would like to see Polka Dot Man take the helm.
Oh boy.
Just have James Gunn bring Polka Dot Man over from DC.
Somehow bring him into the universe.
Yeah. Or what's the name of what do they call him, the Spider-Man villain? Spot or something?
I have no idea.
Who's the guy who is his spots are like portals or something. He's covered in black and white spots, and they're like portals.
There's too many.
I'm talking myself into this as I speak.
I think you're the only one convinced that this movie could work. You and maybe Kevin Feige. That man is full of tricks.
I'm calling him right now. Well, if you like this podcast, please click thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at T.H.O Movie Reviews. And please check out all the great reviews and content we have at thomoviereviews.wordpress.com. Once again, I'm your host, Bennett Campbell Ferguson. I'm here with Maxwell Meyers, and I feel like I should say I'm some catchphrase about someone assembling, but reviewers assemble. It doesn't have the alliteration of Avengers assemble.
How about for Stan? Enough said.
Well said.